Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the ObamaCare What Do the Changes Implemented and Coming Next Mean to My Business conference call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. Please note that this conference is being recorded. If you need assistance during the call, please press *0 to speak to an operator. I will now turn the call over to your host, Mr. Byron Spencer. You may begin.
Thanks, Richard. My name is Byron Spencer. I'm a 35-plus year veteran in the insurance business and have been involved with ASCC for over 25 years and served in many capacities, but also on the National Safety Council. And today what we're going to try to do is to go through the what officially is called the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. We're going to shorten it when I refer to it as ACA, Affordable Care Act. And we're going to try to show you what has happened, what's been implemented, what we're facing in the very near future, and talk a little bit about the impact of what's happened so far and what we think we can expect as we go forward. The law itself is really two different laws, a Senate bill and a House reconciliation bill. They are 2,562 pages long, and if any of you are interested, I do have copies of those from the congressional record. One of the reasons that I am doing these kind of seminars and have been doing them is I am one of the few people out there that have read this. And the reason that I have read it is we originally had or we do have a customer who, when this law came into effect, was one of the first to be affected by it before really much analysis or cliff notes or anything had been developed. And so we really had to develop a little bit of a roadmap very quickly in a matter of a few days as this thing was coming into play. The table of contents alone is 21 pages. And when you read this thing, it does not read like a book. It is very much a cut and paste kind of a document where this group or that group wrote and inserted. It doesn't flow, but it also is very vague. It gives the Secretary of Health and Human Services the power to implement via rules and guidelines, and so it's a little short on detail. This slide said there have been hundreds of administrative rules. This is a little out of date, this slide. The last I looked, there's been about 15,000 pages of additional regulations that have been put forward that are either final or are pending approval. And the thing is to roll out on an 8-year implementation schedule. As it first came into play, I want to just sort of, so you understand the whole movie, we have to understand what has already occurred. And some of the major changes that happened originally in 2010, coverage was required to no longer have a lifetime maximum, meaning there could be no limits. A lot of them, policies at the time had $2 or $5 million treatment limits, and it could have no annual limits for what Health and Human Services was to later determine would be essential benefits. It changed the pre-existing condition exclusion under age 19. It allowed children to stay on policies to age 26. It required a certain amount of preventative care as defined by Health and Human Services to be paid for 100% by an insurance plan without deductible or copay. and it required all emergency care to be treated in network. As a result of these changes in the first year, we saw about a 10 to 12% increase in premiums for these changes because they really forced some additional insurance purchase, particularly this piece of 100% preventative care being funded without a deductible or without copay. It did have a tax credit feature that was introduced right away, and that was to try to incent small employers that didn't have group coverage to offer coverage to their employees. And the problem with it, very few companies utilized it because it started out with a max credit of possibly 35% of the premium could be credited off of the employer's tax bill, but it reduced between 10 up to a max of 25 employees and between $25,000 in annual pay up to 50. So, for instance, if you had 25 employees and you paid them on average $50,000, then there would be no credits. If you had 10,000 under 10 and you paid them under $25,000 a year, you would get the full 35%. At this point, it's not been very popular, although this remains in place and may come back into play as we get down the line here. There was a concept of grandfathered plans, and that was the old you can keep your plan if you like it. Well, it didn't truly turn out that way because the concept of grandfathered plans really didn't keep you from having to comply with most of the features of this new ACA. It delayed very few of the features. There was some value to plans that were discriminatory inside of an employer, highly technical kind of stuff. A lot of employers, or most employers, opted out of this because if they wanted to be able to modify or change their plan, they would lose their grandfathered status. And so the latest statistics that I have seen say most employer plans are no longer grandfathered. Now, a number of insurance plans, insurance carrier plans that are for smaller employers have retained that status. And so that is, it really didn't make a whole lot of difference. They created temporary high-risk pools, and this was to take care of all of these folks that we were told were unable to get insurance because they were sick. And the access on this varied by state, but it had some onerous provisions. You had to be uninsured for 6 months, and those of you who have ever had any serious illness going on realize that if you are being treated for a serious illness for 6 months, you probably don't have many assets left. It was very, very underutilized. I've got on this slide that under 100,000 people enrolled nationwide. The actual number is probably more like 78,000. And unfortunately, they just announced within the month, last month, that they have suspended this. They ran out of money, and this is no longer available. There was a provision that we are going to have to start doing W-2 reporting. Now, this applied at this first stage only to firms with over 250 employees. And this thing was originally scheduled to roll out in 2011. It was delayed, and the first reports are now coming due. So for those of you on the call that have more than 250 employees, you're probably already engaged in this process, and you are now going to be reporting on the employee's W-2 the value of the insurance product that you are providing for them if you are providing them. And so that is just rolling out, and again, only affects at the first level folks with more than 250 employees. That is going to step down, and it will hit down, I think, to 50 ultimately. The question everybody asks is, why is the IRS getting involved in this information? And if you look at the new W-2 form, you will find that there is a new box for this, which sort of makes it look like it's in the income area. So I can't really comment on why, but the IRS is going to be tracking this information. There was originally a provision to form a long-term care program to be able to pay for home health care, and it was to be voluntary. That actuarially proved not to be feasible, and Congress canceled that provision of the law. It does, throughout the process, make some modifications and limits on health savings accounts, flexible spending accounts, all of the rules of these. You'll see a few, as we go forward here, some comments on how some of those rules are changed, what you can spend the money on changes, and ultimately the limits change. In 2011, the manufacturers of branded drugs were assessed $2.5 billion of additional taxes. And in 2011, there was some reduction of Medicare Advantage funding, and for those of you familiar with Medicare coverage for drugs, what is called the donut hole is ultimately going to be phased out, and that, in my opinion, is a good thing. If any of you have seniors, your parents, or anything in your life and have been involved in that, it's a complicated situation to explain and to understand. Originally in the law, they were going to force companies to do 1099 reporting for every vendor they did business with that they gave more than $600. This was also deemed to be onerous and pretty much hated by everyone, and that provision of the law was canceled as well. 2012 did bring a introduction of a comparative effectiveness fee. It starts out at $1 per person that in your insurance plan, and this comparative effectiveness research is euphemistically what some have called the start of death panels or whatever, and it steps up to $2, but the 2012 fee is payable in 2013. There was a requirement of uniform explanation of coverage, and I'm sure most of you have been through this and you have seen the impact of this. This is a new way to explain to employees about their coverage, and it's all now standardized and kind of a 8-page cartoon character kind of a way that everyone will use exactly the same means of explanation to their employees. Probably a good thing. minimum loss ratio calculations were implemented, and for what this basically is it said for the large portion of the market, the carriers, insurance companies had to pay 80% of the premium out in actual medical services costs, and for the small business market, 85%, and for the small business market, 80%. And the impact that we have noted in this is there has been some reduction of availability in the small business market, and they were forced, the insurance companies were forced to cut commissions and servicing ability to agents and to providers, and so a lot of insurance providers and agents are less interested in servicing the small end of the market because of this change. And that brings us up to current. And so in 2013, the flexible spending accounts will now be limited to $2,500. I'm thinking about how I'm going to explain this. For any of you who have provided retiree health benefits, or if you work for a larger company that does provide retiree health benefits, there is a portion that if the company gave drug coverage to the retirees, that they could get a deduction from the government and a credit, and it's called retiree drug subsidy. And what the concept was that the law, the way Part D Medicare coverage for drugs was being implemented, if they went out into the market, the government would have been paying for this portion anyway, and so if the employer wanted to take that responsibility, the government would give them that money back. And all of this is not the program itself, but it's impacting the deductibility to the carrier. And because of that, I have read some studies that say more companies may think about dropping retiree care as something that they provide. There is a new medical device tax of 2.9%, and what this is doing, this would be things like knee replacements, pacemakers, any kind of medical device that is out there. The government now is taxing at an additional 2.9%. And so it is our anticipation that this is a pass-through. Obviously, the manufacturer is not going to eat this cost because it's going to all of them equally, and so we see this as an additional pass-through tax. There is an increase in Medicare taxes of 0.9% if you're over $200,000 in individual income or $250,000 in family income, and then also, very notably, a 3.8% tax on investment income over $200,000 or $250,000 family. And this has caught some news because it could impact things like investment property or a second home or a family business. All of these sorts of issues could fall into the investment category. So these taxes are all the beginning taxes to help pay for some of what you're going to see as we continue forward. They're also beginning this year to reduce Medicare reimbursements. And what is going to be implemented this year is some kind of it's what they're calling a value-based system, and it will be a penalty and reward system as determined by the government on how effectively they think various service providers are their outcomes, meaning less returns, fewer visits, these sorts of outcomes will get bonuses to those healthcare providers, and vice versa. So if they are not as successful, then they will be penalized in the reimbursements that they will receive. The Medicare reductions that you may have heard some about are pretty sizable. We're talking about $716 billion, and this slide sort of shows how that will be broken out. And you can see that the majority, the $415 billion, is going to be taken from what's called fee-for-service. What that is the doctors. So that's why you're beginning to see a number of doctors make noise that they're no longer going to take Medicare patients, or they will only accept a limited amount of Medicare patients. Then the Medicare Advantage is the kind of plan where instead of taking Social Security, you buy from an insurance carrier an all-inclusive plan, and they are cutting $156 billion funding to that. I just saw a thing yesterday, unfortunately, that indicates that the majority of Medicare Advantage purchasers are the poorer part of the public, and so it's going to adversely affect poorer seniors more than it will vice versa. And then $31 billion in hospital payments, and the $114 billion is in something called Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB. And what this is a new panel is going to be empowered with 12 members appointed by Congress and 3 members appointed by the President to make judgment over what Medicare procedures will pay for and what Medicare won't pay for. And so they will now be setting the standards of what Medicare will reimburse and what it will not reimburse on a go-forward basis. So Independent Payment Advisory Board, again, 15 folks appointed. So this leads us to 2014, and 2014 is the really, really big year of this whole law. It's what you've probably heard the most about, and it is just around the corner. As a matter of fact, some of the details are finally beginning to come out about it. The concept is this, that there will be health insurance exchanges. And what these exchanges will be, for lack of a better term, is if any of you have ever been on Expedia or Travelocity or Hotwire or Hotels.com or any of those kind of sites where it's a search engine to find airplane flights or to find hotels or trips or cruises or whatever, where it's shopping multiple providers. And the search engine does that work for you. These are going to be insurance search engines. And what they are going to do is the government has decided that there will be only four kinds of plans. And basically, they're all actually the same plan. It's going to be like a shopping mall where there's only one product for sale. And the coverages, how the program works, will all be the same. The only differences will be the deductible and copays. And so they're giving them medal names like the Olympics, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And obviously the bronze, being the least, will have the highest deductible and copays, and the platinum will have the least. And so as the system gets implemented, the states were given the choice of either forming their own plans or going into partnership with the federal government, or saying we don't want anything to do with it, and if you're going to do it, federal government, you do it on your own. And the reason that this is a issue was cost to the states. And there was some money made available, but a lot of states judged that it was not enough money. And so if you could imagine the undertaking of creating a system like Expedia or one of these travel sites from scratch, and they were only given the information to know what it had to look like within the last few months, the bottom line is most states decided not to become involved. And currently, 26 states have decided to just let the federal government do whatever they want to do. 6 states have decided to partner with the federal government, and 16 states have decided to have their own plan. Now, some of those states, like Massachusetts, already had their own plan. So this was not already had an exchange in place. So it was not a big financial commitment to them to be able to do this. The other thing that will begin to impact us is there's going to be the government has decided to change the way insurance is rated. And in the past, folks were that were older and or sick were rated up to about 7 or 8 times higher than a young person in their 20s who was not sick. Well, the new government mandates will say that that can no longer occur. You will not be able to discriminate based on age or sex or health. Well, the age you can, but only up to 3 times, and sex and health not at all. The only one that you can really discriminate against is smoking, and I think they're allowing up to 5 times increase for smokers. So what this new rating system is going to do is it appears to shift more cost to younger folks and healthier folks inside the system. And so we have heard some, and we don't really know for sure, but for instance, the CEO of Aetna just came out and said he expects 40 to 100% increases in premiums because of this shifting, and but there will also be some winners. And an employer group, if your company happens to have a lot of sick and old people, you may be a beneficiary. But basically, that change is going to occur. Also, in 2014, we get into an employer mandate situation, and the rules on this were just released about 45 days ago. It's something called shared responsibility. And what it's basically impacting at this point is employers with more than 50 employees. We think that will drop as time goes on, but at this point it's at 50. And it says that if you have 50 employees, or the equivalent of that in full and part-time type folks. There's some calculations as to how you understand whether they're up to being counted as an employee or not, basically 30 hours, but it's more complicated than that. That you must provide a health care plan to them that pays more than 60% of the benefit of the cost of the health care, and that the portion that they pay cannot exceed 9.5% of their family income. Well, this has generated a lot of questions to say, well, how do we know what their family income is? And so this is one of those rules that's not totally etched in stone yet. And at least for the first go-round, they are saying that you can use the 9.5% of the employee's income, but when all of this is sorted out, it appears their intent is for the IRS to know that information. And so if you do not offer health care to your employees, or you don't hit this 60% and 9.5% limitation, then you will be fined $2,000. There's going to be a subsidy available out there for employees that make less than 400% of the poverty level, and I'm going to get into that and what that really means. But in the end, if it is a situation where you did not offer a health care plan and your person is eligible for a subsidy, then the fine would be $3,000, not $2,000. Well, we do know that the average employer cost this last year was a little over $10,000. And so there is a great deal of fear that many employers will say, you know what, I think I'm going to pay the fine and not continue to provide health care. We have seen some surveys that indicate as much as 30% of employees are saying that they are considering, employers are saying that they are considering no longer offering this benefit. On the flip side of this employer mandate is an individual mandate. And so if there is no employer plan, the individual is now mandated by law to purchase insurance. And the starting penalty can be up to 1% of their earned income. It starts out quite low, I think down to $95 or something of this nature. Again, will be collected by the IRS, but it can go up to 1% in the first year of your earned income. And there will be tax credits or subsidies. And to give you an idea, this slide, I just saw some new poverty numbers, and it's off just a little bit, but 400% of poverty would be $47,000 as an individual and $94,000 as a family of four. So what that's going to mean is that the taxpayers will offer credits or subsidies to folks that make less than 94 with a family of four or less than 47 to go out into these exchanges and to buy coverage. There will be also a new insurer tax, starts out this year at $8 billion of additional tax revenues and escalates up to about $14.3 billion in additional taxes. Again, we feel these will be passed along, not eaten by the health insurance industry. There is a new reinsurance fee which was just announced, and this is for every person who has insurance coverage, and this is to help create a reinsurance pool for these exchanges in case the exchange has excessive losses. And that is going to be $5.25 per month per person that's insured in this country. And that is going to be assessed. If you're with an insurance company, the insurance company will collect it. But if you're self-insured, it's something that you will have to remit as the employer that has the self-insurance plan. As I mentioned earlier, this Payment Advisory Board really starts its activity in 2014, the Independent Payment Advisory Board. This is the one that's figuring out what Medicare payments will be made and what Medicare payments will not be made. The next point is the original law had 2014 as the date to expand Medicaid. And it was required of the states in the original law. And what they were going to have to do is expand Medicaid to 130% of its current levels, which would bring more folks into the Medicaid program. For those of you who may know, Medicaid is actually handled by the states. And so while there was some funding support in the original law, the states screamed on this one. And in the Supreme Court considerations, they said the individual mandate was legal because it was a tax and was going to be collected by the IRS, but they said that states' rights prevented the federal government from insisting on this Medicaid expansion. And so most of the states, when that mandate was limited, have decided not to expand their Medicaid eligibility at this stage. So this is one of those things where, as a part of the process, it was envisioned that this would pick up a section of the insured people into plans. After that, there's not much further. The penalty on individuals does escalate to 2.5% of your taxable income in 2016 if you don't buy coverage. And in 2018, there's an excise tax on high-cost plans. And what they've got set in the law right now, pretty much everybody's plan would be subject to this certainly all the union plans, all the high benefit plans out there. So there will be some screaming on this as we go forward. Overall costs, I put this slide out just because when the law was passed, the cost estimates of what it was going to cost to implement this thing were the numbers that you see in the blue, the $929 billion and the $944 billion. When they took a look at it a year later, this is from the Congressional Budget Office, it escalated from to $1.4 trillion on the 10-year total. When they looked at it again in July of 2012, it went up to $1.8 trillion. So every time the CBO looks at this thing, the cost of it keeps going up and up and up. They should be doing another study here before too long. In summary, what we have seen so far since this thing has been implemented is we have seen premium increases, which in my mind are making affordability issues even harder. We feel the changes in the community rating structures and that are going to drive premiums up potentially even further. We have seen a great deal of provider consolidation. There's a provision that requires electronic record keeping amongst the docs and the hospitals. And just as an anecdote, I personally, every one of my doctors has been forced into a position of selling out to hospital groups, a cardiologist, a general practitioner, a neurosurgeon. All have been bought by hospital groups since this law has been provided or put into place. And so we're seeing a consolidation of the number of providers out there, which, at least from my perspective, leads some concerns. This law creates 159 new government agencies or boards. There are 20 tax increases involved in it. And the latest estimate that I have seen, there'll still be 35 million people without insurance when it's done. I think there's some concerns, or I have concerns, about what the impact to Medicare is going to be in terms of some of the reductions and the lack of providers that are willing to participate in the Medicare program. So at this point, I think we are we've got more questions than we have answers. We know what's coming next. We know what has occurred so far. In terms of long-term, obviously we've got 535 people in Washington that can make changes to this law any day of the week that they would like to. And as you can see, they have made some already. And so, this is where we are at this point. And at this point, Richard, I will turn it over to you and facilitate any questions that we might have. I've got up on the screen my contact information, my email, my direct line. Then I've also got a couple of links. There's just a tremendous amount of information on those sites. And there's also a lot of information on ASCCHealthPlans.com site. And so a lot of stuff out there. Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please press 01 on your touch-tone phone. If you wish to withdraw your question, you may press 02. There will be a short delay before the first question is announced. Once again, if you have a question, please press 01 on your keypad now. Standing by for audio questions. Once again, for any questions or follow-ups, press 01 on your touch-tone phone. We have a question online from Marty Pennell. Please go ahead.
Yes. Do you know how they're looking at the 50-employee limit as far as related ownership companies? We've got multiple companies with common ownership, but some of those companies have under 50 employees, and we've historically included all those companies under one plan, and was just wondering if that's addressed anywhere.
It is. Obviously, if they're in the same plan, they would look at them as being, but there are I want to say, and I don't have it in front of me. I wish I had it in front of me, but there is a thing that I would be glad to send you, which is the calculation methodology. It's about 80 pages of guidelines, but it is very good because it answers all of these questions. So why don't you shoot me an email and remind me of what you're looking for, and I'll send you that attachment, and I think you'll find the answers in there.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Once again, for any questions, press 01 on your touch-tone phone. And I'm showing no further questions at this time.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for participating, and if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me directly.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating.